The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday, September 7th, second show today. And we're going to be talking socialism, fascism, what they are, what the difference is, and why they're both anti-human. Let's see, before we get there, there's a poll. We have a poll about whether they have polls. So you can vote. You can go to the chat, top of the chat. You can vote. So far, it looks like it changes from minute to minute. The no's had it earlier, and now it's flipped completely to the yeses. So it's 61-39, yes to have polls. Oh, God. I mean, the real question is, what are we going to poll? What questions do we ask? It's tricky. They have to be fun, they have to be interesting, and they have to at least entail the possibility of voting either way, right? So it's going to have to take some thinking and consideration to figure out how to do the poll. We have 24 votes. We have 37 people watching live. Go to the chat, vote on the poll, and let's see what happens. All right, now Ian says echo is less than this morning. Maximus says, wow, voice is worse. Yeah, I don't know what to do about you guys. You guys have to decide. Is it better? Is it worse? I'm in the anti-reverb setting. That's the thing. All right, let's do this. All right, maybe that is better. We will see. Kellen, let's get this party started. Value for value. Thanks for everything. $50. That's amazing. Thank you, Kellen. Thanks for the support and for being here. And yeah, we can get things rolling. I did change the setting. Maybe the reverb is better. Hopefully, those of you who are bothered by the reverb, lots of reverb. It's like a Kiss concert. God. Worse than yesterday. Nope. Do you listen back after the show to hear what it sounds like? It's not the point listening back after the show, because it doesn't help me how to solve it. All right, so here's my ask. If there's anybody out there who knows audio, in particular Rodecaster, if you know how to adjust that, that would be great. I have no idea why. I can try this. Why the sound is so bad? I have no idea why that is. So we can. What's that? No. So if somebody is, it sounds worse than earlier today. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. So I just changed it again. I changed another setting. Let me know if this makes any difference. But it's loud now. Second adjustment is worse. There's just no way to win at this. All right. Now it's better. Florida Nick says now it's better. I'm going with Florida Nick because louder, but the reverb is gone. I can make it softer. I've got like this is a heel. This is like a state of the art. You're not gonna get a better microphone than this. It's like a $400-500 microphone, especially for this. I don't know what negative 6 dBs means, it's just not what it should be. I agree. So again, if somebody knows anything about the Rodecaster Duo, Rodecaster Pro, please write to me on yaronbrookshow.com/support. You're not Yaron Brook Show, yaronbrookshow.com, and Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. Write to me at Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. And let me know if you're willing to help me figure this out on the roadcast. I think it's got to be tweaked. This mic is not great. Sound is good now, everybody says, which is interesting. So I lowered the volume on Restream, increased the volume on the roadcaster, and sounds even better now. Okay, maybe the problem is on the Restream software and not on the roadcaster. So maybe the Restream is somehow feeding it back and creating an echo. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about, fixing my audio problems. Everybody's saying it's better now, it's good now, get on with it, stop complaining, Yaron, just get on with the show. All right, let's get on with the show. We're talking today about socialism and fascism. We're talking about what they are. And I think the first thing we want to recognize is that both socialism and fascism are systems, political and economic systems that emphasize the collective and basically are systems that sacrifice the individual for the collective. Both are forms of collectivism. Both are forms of statism. It just got a lot quieter. Out of nowhere, it got a lot quieter. Now you're fading away. I'm fading away. I haven't changed anything, and I'm fading away. How did I fade away if I haven't changed a thing? I did not lower the volume. I didn't touch anything. Oh God. I need a full-time, very low. Everybody says, okay, let's try this. Let's try this. Tell us if this makes any difference. Does this make any difference? Okay. I just listened to a podcast about a different socialist system after Marx. It's called Industrial Revolutions. Highly recommended. All right. I let me know if this is better. And it's not Restream. It's actually OBS. Jennifer says it's quiet. The dials on my machine, Richard says it's better now. All right. Yeah, not sure exactly what's going on, but we're gonna leave it as it is. Yep, volume went up better. So all four need to be up. All right. We can somehow manage that. Let me. All right. Final tweak. Final tweak. There we go. All right. Everybody seems happening now, but the volume is up and the reverb is back. Now louder but echoey. Better now. God, you guys need to wake up your mind. I need to assign one person in the chat who is responsible for sound. And, one person responsible for sound to give me input, because I'm getting contradictory and conflicting views from different people in the audience. By the way, the poll right now, we got 39 votes, 62% yes, 38% no. So you can vote about whether we've got a poll going about whether we should have polls going. And so far the yes is winning out, but it's still early. We've got a whole show, and we can see how we can see as people join if they have an opinion about this. All right, so about socialism and fascism and nationalism, which we talked about the other day, all forms of collectivism, and really because they're all implementation of the state and they're all manifestation of the state, they're all forms of statism. They all require the individual to sacrifice and subordinate his interests for the sake of some group. And they vary moderately about which group that should be. But generally, the idea of the sacrifice, the idea that the individual doesn't matter, that the idea that the individual doesn't have a right to his own life, his own happiness, is what unites them all. What matters and what everybody should be sacrificed for is what changes. The socialists tend to emphasize workers, the proletarian. They tend to emphasize the poor. They tend to emphasize your economic status. And they tend generally to be focused on economic issues. They care about stuff. They care about the material world. They care about economics. They care about material well-being, and they seek to sacrifice the economic well-being of those who have for the economic well-being of those who don't. Well-being here in quotes. Right? They are materialists. And the standard ultimately for them of supposed success is some form of economic equality, some form of material equalization. The world of economics is primarily the world that they care about. Socialism explicitly repudiates private property, explicitly rejects the idea that property is owned by individuals, is created by individuals, and therefore owned by individuals. Everything to them is a collective activity. You didn't build that after all. And ownership, individual ownership doesn't exist. Everything should be in one way or another collectivized. So under socialism, the means of production are owned by the community in one way or another, right? By the community, by government, by one form of government or another, or in the more modern interpretation of modern socialists, the means of production are owned by the workers, by the laborers. As if, management doesn't work, which is implicit in everything they do. So socialism emphasizes the means of production. It emphasizes the distribution of those means of production. It emphasizes the negation of the idea of property rights. It, again, is very much focused on the material world and therefore on what you have and what you claim to own. And it rejects the idea that you, as an individual, own anything. Fascism, in a sense, has no problem with you pretending to own stuff. It has no problem with you having an ownership certificate. Fascism does not argue for the ownership of the means of production by the collective, by the state, by the proletarian, by the workers, by anybody. It leaves you free to own your stuff. But what it does is it empties ownership out of all content. You can't control it. You can't choose what to do with it. You can't choose how to dispose of it. So fascism is more of a system that is less concerned about the mechanics of ownership. What they really care about is control. See, in socialism, they want control, but they also, it's a big deal for them that ownership be eliminated. For them, the goal is some kind of material egalitarianism. For fascism, what they want is the control over the means of production. They still believe, like the socialists, that the individual should be sacrificed for the interest of the group, that the individual should be sacrificed for the interest of the collective or the state. But, you could still pretend to own it. You could still have a certificate showing it. To them, that's unimportant. And indeed, ultimately, material egalitarianism is not that important to the fascists. It's control over the material and very much control over the spirit of man that is important to the fascists. They want to control your spirit, your soul, your mind, your ideas. Of course, ultimately, the socialist wants to do exactly the same. So in the end of the day, the difference is really a difference of emphasis. The fascist emphasizes the state, might emphasize the race in some form of fascism. It emphasizes the nation as the collective to which everyone must be sacrificed. It is typically oriented towards the past, towards a mythology of the past, towards achieving some kind of greatness that existed in the past that this particular collective needs to regain. And it regained through the sacrifice of individuals. The individual has never mattered, does never matter, does not matter. All that matters is the glory of this collective. And how that is achieved by centralized control over your material and spiritual life. But the emphasis primarily is on your spiritual life. They can be rich people, they can be poor people. There's a lot less concern and a lot less emphasis on the egalitarian outcome. Socialism portrays itself as modern. It's not looking at the past. It's looking at the present and the future. It is seeking not some past glory, but some future utopia. A utopia characterized by egalitarian outcome, by equality of outcome, by the negation of all property, the negation of the individual and all material differences between individuals. So those are kind of the pure forms, and socialism, of course, leads to communism when practiced more consistently. So more moderate socialism, if you will, social democracy and so on, is the same basic principle. But here, there's a certain recognition that as an economic system, communism doesn't work. There's a certain recognition that the state owning the means of production is actually destructive and actually doesn't provide the resources necessary for redistribution and for this utopian egalitarianism in the future. So there is a certain accommodation towards private property. There's certain accommodation towards markets, not because there's anything moral or right or just or fair or good about them, but because there's a recognition from a purely economic perspective that they produce the goods, and therefore they are, in a sense, they are what lay the golden eggs that can then be used to create this future utopia or to redistribute. There's actually wealth to redistribute. And what socialists are is really, I'm not talking about the consistent socialists, the socialists who still want a complete revolution. I'm not talking about the kind of socialists who want the complete and utter destruction of capitalism. There are socialists like that. I've debated people like that, and they exist here and there, but they are the minority. It's the majority who vote for Bernie Sanders, who think Elizabeth Warren is fantastic. Those kind of socialists don't want to kill private property. They want to exploit private property. They want to be able to manipulate private property. They want to be able to control private property, and they want to be able to redistribute private property. And in that sense, the reality is that they are more fascist than socialist, which would shock them, of course, because they claim to be anti-fascists, right? They want to keep the facade of private property because they know that is necessary in order for people to work hard, in order to motivate them, in order to incentivize them to create innovation. But then they'll tax them and regulate them as much as they can once they create something worthwhile. So democratic socialists like to pretend that they are far from communism, that they love freedom, they love democracy. But really what they are fascists. Again, not the fascists who want complete authoritarianism, not the fascists who want the complete destruction of the individual for the sake of the collective. They are compromisers. They are all today mixed economists. They all want to provide us all with a little bit of freedom, not too much, but a little bit of freedom. They all want to provide us enough freedom so that we continue to produce, continue to work, continue to bear the burden, continue to sacrifice, and that therefore they have somebody to control, they have somebody to sacrifice, they have somebody to redistribute wealth from. But it's not just wealth. It's also that they have somebody to lord over. Don't forget, it's very much about power. And there's almost, in that sense, no difference today between, and take out kind of the real socialist and the real fascist, and they are some of those, but almost everybody in the middle is a combination. They want some redistribution of wealth, but not too much to destroy incentives. They want some regulations, but not too much as to destroy innovation. They want to control our minds, but not too much. They want to control our material well-being, our spiritual well-being, our sexual lives, every aspect, but not too much. Just some. They want to create some kind of balance. This is the ultimate mixed economy. It's a mixed economy in every single realm. And it's what dominates society today. There are very few real socialists. There are very few real fascists. Everybody's kind of a mixture. And really, in many respects, they're more fascist in America. The socialists in Europe, they're probably more socialist than fascist. And indeed, in America, it's much more likely that we get out and out fascism than we get out and out socialism. Socialism is still a bad word in America. The idea that the state should own the means of production, nobody's really for that. If you look at Elizabeth Warren and you look at J.D. Vance, they both completely agree. They're completely on the same page when it comes to what government should do. Government should control more. In other words, they're both fascists. It's not like Elizabeth Warren says the state should own the means of production. We should do away with private property. She does not believe that. She's much more in line with J.D. Vance's view that there is a greater good, a societal good, a good of the nation, a good of the state, a good of, and she would use different language than he would use. But they basically would agree, and they do, they sponsor legislation together. They basically agree that the greedy, self-interested individual is the real enemy, that individual rights and even property rights are the real enemy, and what is really needed is control, redistribution, and control. Is AOC total ownership? No, I don't think AOC is a communist in that sense. I don't think she wants, I mean, she might be more of a socialist than Elizabeth Warren, but I think she's changing. I think what you learn in politics is, no, I mean, socialism is not doable in America. And it's not a great governing ideology for them. But moderate, some forms of fascism are. Americans basically have agreed to this. They've signed on to it. And this is why Tucker Carlson can completely support Elizabeth Warren's economic agenda, because most Americans believe that we should have more government regulations, more government controls. They claim to be for freedom. They claim to be for property rights. And they like to think they own their home and they own their stuff. Well, but see what happens when you don't pay your property taxes. I mean, then you discover you're just renting your home from the government. See what happens after you build a business if you don't follow the regulations to the letter and they decide to come after you. Look at Google. Let's see what happens to Google. Suddenly, ownership doesn't matter. See what happens when the politicians in power view you as not for the common good, is not serving the greater cause, greater purpose. And suddenly you're ready sheep for the slaughter. And again, left, right, doesn't matter, because they're both collectivists. And in that sense, socialism and fascism are not opposites. They're just variations on the same theme. The theme is the negation of the individual, the expectation of the individual to sacrifice for the group. They're both just variations of collectivism. As I've often said, the real political spectrum is individualism versus collectivism. And, there are lots of different forms of collectivism. There's fascism, there's communism, there's socialism, there's democratic socialism, there's the mixed economy. They're all different forms of collectivism and different levels of collectivism. Certainly communism, fascism, and some of these others are pure, 100%, unequivocal collectivists. And maybe the Social Democrats a little bit more tolerant, if you will, of individualism. The mixed economists want you to have a little bit of freedom. And then we're way over here on the individualist side, and there's very few people in between. Some of the classical liberals, some of the better people on the right, but not many. Everybody is mired in this collectivistic swamp. And, none of them are really interested in, and all of them are just trying to survive in the swamp, trying to backstab the other guys in the swamp, trying to attain as much control as they can in the swamp. But they also realize they can't be viewed as complete fascists or complete socialists, because otherwise they'll alienate people. And, because what they're really doing is preparing the ground, preparing the swamp for the rise of a savior, for the rise of somebody who has the charisma, the audacity, the rhetorical ability to convince Americans of one of the more radical solutions. And here again, I think fascism is much more likely. Americans don't like socialism. They want to keep their illusions about private property. They don't like communism. This country really has matured with an anti-communist bent. But they like collectivism. They like control. They like, big majority of them, like being told what to do. So they're open to authoritarianism. But it'll never be under the guise of socialism. But it doesn't really matter. What difference does it make? The outcome is the same. The result is the same. And Americans are very patriotic. Socialists generally try to at least make the argument that they're not really about the state. They're not about the nation. They're really about the worker or the poor or some other group. And the communists, of course, were internationalists. They were universalists. They were, what do they call them today? Globalists. So the fascist, nationalistic, wrap yourself around a flag is much more likely in America. America's a patriotic country, a country that cares about America, and also America has a glorious past, right? Make America great again, right? It has this greatness in its past. It has a mythology about itself. It has the idea of American exceptionalism, which was true, by the way, but it has this idea of American exceptionalism. So it has all the trappings of nationalism and therefore fascism, rather than a kind of a globalist, internationalist, socialist movement. Americans are not egalitarians, really. They're not concerned about material equality. But they want to control. They want order. It's interesting, there's an article, Patrick Deneen, who is part of the integralist movement, part of this, what they call post-liberal movement. These are the Catholic fascists who would love to run this country. And Patrick Deneen has an article out there now saying, it's time we stop emphasizing freedom. What we really need to be emphasizing is order. what religion provides us, what Catholicism provides us, and what the state should provide us, and is the top priority of the state to provide us, is order. Freedom comes later. Freedom, and freedom will be constrained by the necessities of the time and the place and what is allowable, right? But that's Patrick Deneen, professor at Notre Dame, massive rising star on the intellectual side of the new right. America is much more likely to go for law and order, particularly for order, than it is to go for what they perceive as socialism and the kind of BLM riots, the kind of disorder that socialism seems to imply. And this is why I think, one of the reasons I think that the right, the new right, the fascist right, or the right that leans fascist, is much more likely to appeal to Americans long term in its appeal to religion, in its appeal to the flag, in its appeal to order, than a bunch of socialists or a bunch of woke critical race theory wackos who are chipping away and destroying America on small scale constantly. But I think what am I doing here? But who can't, at the end of the day, get real traction. So it's because they're so perceived as so un-American. And have no real connection to the American people. And Jennifer says, order reminds me of marching Nazis. Yeah, it should. And it should scare the hell out of you. Right? So, number one value is order, not freedom. Reject freedom in the name of order. And you'll see more and more of that, because the language of Patrick Deneen, the language of Sohrab Ahmari, the language of these new right is filtering down because they face no real opposition, and they face no real nobody who's really going to tell them no, that's wrong. People will tell them to moderate. People tell it's not exactly right. I mean, I saw a video today. I should have done the show on this because I would have got a lot more viewers if I'd done the show this. I saw a video today of this young woman on TikTok, right? And she's 29 years old. I don't know if you saw this. She's 29 years old, and she goes on TikTok and she says, look, I don't have kids. I'm not married. And the consequence of that is, I went to I think a Beyonce concert last night, and I got drunk. And this morning, I had a bit of a hangover, so I slept in until 10. I thought I should get up a few times, but I decided to sleep in because I don't have any kids and I'm not married and it's a Saturday and I can just sleep in. And then, I don't know what I'm going to do today. I'm going to hang out, I'm going to have a good time. I read about shakshuka, this dish. It sounds really cool. I'm going to learn how to make shakshuka today. That sounds like a cool thing to do. And then I'm going to watch a bunch of television. Sadly, the television she's going to watch is a bunch of reality TV, disgusting, stupid stuff. Anyway, just a person who has, granted, pretty shallow values, but is expressing a certain independence and a certain, individualism. She's going to live her life the way she sees fit. And she kept saying in the video, I'm going to do what I want. I'm not going to do what society expects me to do. I'm not married. I don't have kids, and I'm going to take advantage of that fact for now. Right? Not against kids, not against marriage, but just right now I'm not. So I'm going to party. But I'm also going to pursue the values like making shakshuka that I really, really enjoy. Anyway, just a silly TikTok video. Matt Walsh posted. And, God, I should actually get this up for you because I don't want to paraphrase. But what Matt Walsh shows us is the level at which the right wants control. They want to control really how you live, what your life is like. They want to control. Yeah, here it is. Let me just find this. Yeah, her name's Julia Mazur, and let's see. Yeah, and I haven't seen, he did a tweet on this. I'm trying to find the tweet where he comments on her video. Yeah, he says, her life doesn't revolve around her family and kids, so instead it revolves around TV shows and pop stars. Worst of all, she's too stupid to realize how depressing this is. Right? And then the 13.8 thousand comments below, almost all of them support Matt Walsh. He continues, he says, if you don't have a family, at least do something interesting with your time. These people have absurd amounts of free time, and they do absolutely nothing with it, wasting their lives, staring at little glowing boxes, absolutely soul-crushing. Maybe. But why do you care? Why is this of interest? Is it because you want her to have a fuller, more, interesting life? Do you want her to be studying at university? Do you want her to pursue values that are more substantial, more meaningful? Or do you really want her just to be a mom and have kids? I mean, there are various ways to say, hey, I forget her name. Her name's, the internet's gone crazy about this, of course. But her name's Julia something. But you could criticize Julia and say, hey, Julia, there's more to life than reality shows. Why don't you watch a good show? You could even recommend something to her, and there are lots of things you could do with that. But the right doesn't want that. The right doesn't want you to have a self-fulfilled life, pursuing your own values, having a good time, going to music concerts that you like, watching TV shows that you want, sleeping in on a Saturday after you're a little hungover. I'm sure Matt Walsh has been hungover. I have a feeling that's happened. They don't want that. They want you to follow the path that they have set, the path that they know is the only just right path. They don't care about you as an individual. They don't care about your values. They don't care about your wants. They don't care about your desires. They want control over your values in a way that's even more intrusive than the left. The left, I mean, this is changing because both the left and the right are morphing into each other. But it used to be that the left cared about your material values, the right cared about your spiritual values, and you can see that. But the right seems to care more and more about redistribution and control of material values, and the left seems to care more and more about spiritual values, and they're both merging into total control of the entirety of you, of the individual. But the thing that unites them all is they don't care about the individual. They don't care about your values. They don't care about what you want. And by the way, I don't know what this woman does. I mean, for all you know, for all Matt Walsh knows, she has an amazing career that she works hard, during the day, during the week, and she's relaxing on the weekend. And yeah, she's got bad taste in television. But is that going to be your total evaluation of her? And she had a follow-up video, which I thought was quite good, and she encouraged us to try out her shakshuka recipe. I mean, she did something productive during the Saturday. She learned how to make shakshuka, which if you've never had shakshuka, you're missing out on a major value in life. Shakshuka is like a great breakfast food, right? It's this tomato thing with eggs and you make it a little spicy. It's just amazing. It's deliciousness. It's just great. So she did something productive. But no, we've got to trash him. Why? Because she doesn't have family and kids, and she's 29 years old, and she really should have family and kids, and that's what is the right and just path to God, for the good of society. Oh, America's population is shrinking, particularly Native Americans, white Americans maybe, is shrinking. We need to have more kids. We need to get her on the path of having more kids. Shakshuka is not Greek. Shakshuka is, I think it's a word in Arabic, and my guess is it's North African. Certainly they make it in Morocco. They make it throughout the Middle East. There are various variations of it. I wouldn't be surprised if there was something similar in Greece, and Turkey probably has a shakshuka, but I think its origins are Northern Africa or the Middle East. And there are variations, like different countries, different people in different countries make shakshuka differently, and it varies, but it is super delicious when it's done well. All right, so socialism, fascism. We live in a mixed economy with both. We're surrounded in many respects by both. The primary orientation, I think, of our culture is towards fascism. Socialism and fascism are both impractical, because impractical in terms of individual happiness, certainly, but they don't care about individual happiness, but they're impractical in terms of economic success, because they demand centralized control. Centralized control always fails economically. It negates everything that makes a market thrive, the price system, individual innovation, the ability of individuals to use their mind freely without permission, and the interaction, the free interaction between individuals, the free trading that happens, but the free, not just competition, but collaboration that happens, which both fascism and socialism stop and interfere in and regulate and control and limit. So both fascism and collective and socialism have to break down, and the mixed economy has to break down. It breaks down into primarily the mixed economy, because it keeps enough markets alive to keep drudging forward, is what it breaks down into this slow economic growth, stagnation, with periodic economic shocks like inflation that raise the cost of living and lower the standard of living, but then slowly, economic growth gets you out of it. But it's not the dynamic, exciting, massive increase in quality and standard of living that true freedom, people under freedom, really experience and are really impacted by. It's immoral because it demands a sacrifice of your life. For what? For the group to be defined, for the majority, for the weak, for the right color skin, for the right ethnic background, for the right genetic makeup, for the nation, for the state, for people in power, for somebody, fill in the blank, right? For oppressed people, for the disenfranchised, for those who are at the bottom of the intersectionality pyramid. But it's immoral because it expects you as an individual to give up your life, your happiness, your flourishing, your mind, because it takes away choices. It takes away decision making. Your mind, it takes away your mind. For what? For some mystical end. And that's the interesting thing, is both fascism and socialism end up as mystical. So is a mixed economy at the end of the day. What are we trying to maximize? Something called GDP? Something out there that is society's interests, the common good. What are those? Where are they? Point to them. Show me. There is nothing. Even in its most mildest form ultimately it's a form of mysticism. The sanctity of the majority, the sanctity of the vote. By the way, we've got voting going on in the Yaron Brook show, and so far it's 71 to 29 in favor of polls. So we're going to do polls, right? Because I, as you know, I follow majoritarian rule, right? You have spoken, and Daniel actually promised to bribe me earlier. He said he wants polls, and he promised to bribe me. And since I haven't seen the bribe yet. I'm still waiting for the bribe, Daniel. But he promised to bribe me, and since I am playing, into the mixed economy idea of democracy, I'm going to accept the bribe and I guess have polls. 72 to 28, and somebody voted in favor of polls, so it looks good. So we'll see. I need to think up of some original polls. If you have polls you would like to have, send them to me, and we'll set them up, and we can run them and have fun and have a good time doing it. All right. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more you can say. You can look at history. You can look at examples all over the world. And one of the things that's interesting, just I'll end with this point, is that both socialism and fascism we tried over and over again. Mixed economies have been tried. And the more socialist, fascist a mixed economy is, the worse it does. The more consistently it follows socialism or fascism, the worse it does. And here, worse it does, just objective economic parameters. Human well-being, standard of living, quality of life, GDP, innovation, progress, and by any standard like that of economic well-being. Socialism and fascism and the mixed economies that strive towards those are massive failures, particularly as compared to, societies that are more oriented towards freedom. And the more oriented towards freedom a society is, the more successful it is. But notice here that when I use successful, I'm really talking about individual lives. Prosperity, standard of living, quality of life, human well-being. But that's not their standard. And that's why they don't consider it necessarily as failures, or they don't think it's a failure of their system. They've got an ideal. The ideal is not to be questioned. The greater good of fill in the blank. That can't be questioned. That's a mystical, revealed knowledge. It's just like God. You can't question God. There's no point in questioning God. God is just there. You can't question the socialist ideal. It's just there. And they haven't achieved it. Okay, we'll keep trying. And in a sense, they bought into this idea of the Christianity of, well, we're never going to get heaven on earth. There's an afterlife. Well, the socialists keep trying, but human beings are flawed, so you never can, they've accepted original sin. But we keep trying socialism, we keep failing, we try, it fails, we try, it fails, we try, it fails. We keep trying because it's the ideal. There's nothing else. The only alternative is to give up an ideal, on the ideal, to give up on truth, to give up on goodness. Altruism, which is sacrifice for others, which is the negation of self for the sake of others, what altruism really means, the moral code that basically is upheld by almost everybody, is a moral code that necessitates socialism or fascism or something out there that is the good that we as individuals must sacrifice towards. And if it doesn't seem to work at some superficial materialistic level, it just means we need to try harder. Unless we try and rethink our basic fundamental concepts. Now, of course, the alternative is an ideal of individualism. The alternative is the ideal of freedom, real freedom. But that requires a complete change in morality. That requires us to rethink the morality of altruism. That requires us to challenge not just the idealism of the left and right, but to challenge their fundamental morality, their fundamental premises. So, of course, there's such a thing as ideals that are self-interested and individualistic. Those are the true ideals. But those are completely outside of the mainstream. And they're certainly not liberal, not in the even classical liberal sense. Classical liberals don't believe in selfishness. They believe in a soft altruism. They don't believe in individualism taken all the way. They believe in a kind of mixed economy mixture, some individualism, more individualism than anybody else. It's only objectivism that actually presents an alternative. The fundamental ideals are the ideals of individualism, self-interest, and capitalism versus the ideals of altruism, sacrifice, and collectivism. One set of ideals grounded in reality, grounded in human nature, grounded in the nature of man and the nature of the world, and the other, a mystical floating abstraction that goes counter to human nature and counter to reality and is doomed to fail. But because mankind has bought into altruism hook, line, and sinker, almost nobody challenges the ideals of collectivism. All right, even if they challenge their application. So there are lots of people out there who don't like authoritarianism, don't like socialism and fascism, but have not really given up on collectivism, not if you look at how they live their life, how they vote, their political views, how they think things should be organized. They're still buying into collectivism. All right, let's turn to our super chat. We are way behind on our target for the day. So please consider asking questions. Daniel, I'm still looking for the bribe. So please consider asking questions and participating. By asking questions, you get to steer the program in the direction you want. You can use the super chat feature: $2, $5, $100, $500. I think the limit is $500. You can put any one of those into play in order to ask a question, make a comment, argue a point, or just support the show. You can use a sticker to support the show and help out make the show viable. So thank you in advance to all the supporters and super chatters. If you want to support the show on a monthly basis, the best way to do that is on Patreon. And the alternative, Patreon, just look Yaron Brook Show on Patreon. The alternative is PayPal. The best way to do that is through the yaronbrookshow.com/support website, and you can make a contribution via PayPal. Also, if anybody wants to sponsor a show, shows sponsorships are $1,000. You get to decide on the theme and the topic. It can be on anything as long as I feel qualified to talk about it. I'm happy to do it. So let me know if you would like to sponsor a particular show and support the Yaron Brook Show. By that means, we typically have 1 to 2 sponsors a month, which really helps finance YBS. All right, let's jump in with Liam. Liam, I knew after the COVID lockdowns and the overturning of Roe v Wade that fascism is going to engulf us. We can't stop it in the short run. The question is, how brutal would it be? Pornography bans or gas chambers? I think gas chambers are unlikely for a variety of reasons. I think gas chambers are unlikely. I think what we're going to get is going to be a lot softer than that. And it's going to take time. I still think there is there's enough people in America that have an essential pro-liberty spirit that they're not going to be steamrolled completely. They might be steamrolled for a while. They might be steamrolled on a particular issue, but they won't be steamrolled completely. It's going to be gradual. A lot of stuff is going to happen to prepare the stage for it. I think the election of Donald Trump was an important step in that direction, but there's still quite a few steps more to go, before it actually fully manifests itself. But there's no question that is the direction we're heading. Now, I am somewhat, encouraged by the fact that when Roe versus Wade was overturned, there was a huge backlash against that. And indeed, in pretty much every place where abortion rights are being put to the vote, abortion rights have won. That is, the anti-abortion forces have lost. And I think that is a fantastic sign, even in red states that have been willing to put it up for a vote. The restrictionists, the people who want to ban abortion completely, have lost time and time again. They lost in Kansas, they lost in Ohio. In deeply red states, they still seem to lose. So that's a good sign. So I'm still not convinced that Americans are quite ready to just roll over and give up the cause of liberty. I think a lot of what happened under COVID was motivated by fear. Fear is a very strong inducement. I think that any attempt to take away substantial amounts of liberty and freedom from Americans is going to come under the guise of fear. I used to think that would be fear resulting from kind of Islamic terrorism. Maybe it's going to be a virus. Maybe it's going to be other forms of terrorism, other forms of violence, or BLM, or who knows what it'll be. But there's no question that fear is the primary motivator that incentivizes people to give up on liberty, give up on freedom, and be willing to hand over control to someone else. Shazbot has a quote from Blackadder, one of my favorite all-time shows. Maybe the funniest show ever. Blackadder, if you've never seen it, highly recommend you get it on one of the streaming. I'm sure one of the streaming platforms has it. Blackadder says, "How would you like to earn some money? French aristocrat. No, I would like the people to earn it and then give it to me." I mean, that's perfect. That's perfect. But that's typical of the humor in Blackadder. And there's a lot of it aimed at ridiculing the French, which is always, how can you go wrong doing that? Okay, curious, is the sound gotten better later in the show? Worse, same, still worse than yesterday, better than yesterday, or you're just used to it and you've given up having any opinion about it? Again, I'll ask if there's anybody who knows anything about Roadcaster, let us know. That'll be, I'd love somebody to help me get this straightened out and get this with good sound. All right. James says, "Is there such a thing as necessary evil, or is all evil unnecessary?" Well, there's a sense in which all evil is unnecessary. Fundamentally, I mean, in a principled way, evil is always unnecessary. Evil is always, evil always gets in the way of life. You don't go closer to death in order to advance towards life. Evil is the anti-life. Evil is that which harms human life. And you can't have a necessary thing that harms you. There might be necessary pain. There might be necessary short-term inconvenience. But necessary evil, there is no such thing. There is no such thing. There might be unavoidable evil. But if it's necessary, if it's truly necessary, in a sense that it's truly required for life, then it's not evil, it's good. Michael says, "What are the chances the Republicans pass a national abortion ban? If so, would you consider voting Democrat?" Oh, absolutely. If I thought the Republicans were going to pass a national abortion ban, I would definitely vote Democratic, to the extent that my vote matters. But I don't think there's a chance, partially because I don't think Republicans can get 60 votes in the 60 votes in the Senate, which is what they need in order to pass an abortion ban on a federal level. It's not clear they can win the Senate. It's not clear they can win the House. And in particular, if they tell the world they're going to pass an abortion ban, it's likely that they lose. And they could lose both the Senate and the House as a consequence of that. So you would have to have 60 senators voting for a national ban. You'd have to have the House voting for it, and you'd have to have a president who's willing to sign that. I just don't see that happening. Okay. Clark says, do you have any heroes who are mixed? Yeah, I mean, almost all my heroes are mixed, right? I mean, take somebody like Steve Jobs, who's definitely one of my heroes, certainly in business and technology and entrepreneurial life. But he basically killed himself because he refused to abide by the recommendations of modern medicine. He decided to try a juice cleanse in order to cure his pancreatic cancer. He was way too enamored with Eastern philosophies, Eastern mysticism. I'm not sure what you would call it, in his personal life. But he's still a hero. I mean, if you look at his career, if you look at how he handled himself, if you look at his success, if you looked at what he achieved, if you looked at how he overcame the odds, if you looked at his genius and his brilliance and his stature and his ability to stand on stage and what he could do, it's stunning. So I mean, that's an example of a mixed hero. So and even so yes, I'd say most of my heroes have some element which they could be better at. But the good is so overwhelming. I mean, it's like you might have sports heroes who might not be quite live up to that in their personal lives. Pancreatic is hard to cure anyway, but it was caught early, and it was a type of pancreatic cancer that could be cured. He could have survived it. That's what's so maddening, is that his death was really unnecessary. He really could have survived it. All right, if you would like to support the Yaron Brook Show, value for value, now would be a good time. We're getting close to the end of the show, and we're way behind on our goal. So a few people stepping up and getting us at least closer to the goal than we are right now would be amazing and would be phenomenal and very much appreciated. Harper Campbell says, would you say about 5 to 10% of people actually matter and are worth your time? Everyone else is largely mindless and just takes up space. I don't know, and I don't know that I'd say it that way, because there are a lot of people out there that I might have no business with and have no interest in, but they're working and they're productive and they're doing things and they're making a difference in my life, even if I don't know that they are because of the work that they do. So even if I don't find them interesting, even if I don't want to have anything to do with them. But it depends on the context. It depends on what you're talking about. I mean, there are workmen who are phenomenal at what they do, and when I need somebody to come and fix my windows or do work in the home, they are great and they add enormous value to my life. But in the context of changing the world, are they important? Probably not. Are they totally mindless? No. Are they largely mindless? No. But are they going to shape the future of humanity? Probably not either. So it's very difficult to make sweeping statements like that without context. You have to bring context to it. So the question is, for what? So most people are not people that I am going to spend time with on. But often I don't know who the people who are worthy are not. So often I give a lecture. I don't know if 90% of the audience is probably never going to take anything I say seriously. I do it for the 10%. I don't know if it's 5%, 10%, 0, 65. I don't know. So it's from an intellectual perspective, a perspective of changing the world. It is true that what matter are the 5, 10% who are more intellectual. What matters are the intellectuals. What matters are the influencers. What matters are the people who speak up about ideas. What matters are the people who shape the culture. It's the culture influencers who make a difference. And whether that's 1%, half a percent, 5%, 10% seems like a lot. It's somewhere probably around 1%. They're the ones who make a difference, probably under 1%. They're the ones who make a difference. They're the ones who shape the world. They're the ones who shape the culture. They're the ones in many respects who determine the future. All right, we're on our final 4 questions. Michael says, demoralization and pacification is the name of the statist game. Do you think we've effectively beat socialism, fascism? We haven't quite figured out how to beat. Well, I don't know. Pacification, what are they trying to pacify? Who are they trying to pacify? Usually they lead to wars, not to peace. And demoralization, yeah, they want to demoralize people. Do I think we effectively beat socialism? No, I mean, not on a global scale. Maybe in the United States to some extent, but we haven't beaten them so much as, we've just, I don't think anybody's beaten them so much as the American spirit was never tuned to socialism. And America always turned its back on them, and it's the inertia is never been with socialism. It's much more likely to be fascism. I don't think as a culture we have figured out how to beat socialism or communism or fascism. Socialism is much more common and prevalent outside the United States, much more popular outside the United States. Look at Latin America, for example. But I don't think it's beaten by a long shot. I don't think it's being beaten. Shazbat, looking at putting polls onto our recommended video lists. I've seen that done by other channels. What does that mean? Putting polls onto our recommended video lists. Who has recommended video lists? You mean the polls serve as a recommended video list? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that means, Shazbat. You're going to have to elaborate. Too late at night for me to figure that one out. Who are the main rivals in the Spanish Civil War? Well, I'm not an expert on the Spanish Civil War, but my understanding is, on the one hand, you had Franco and the fascists, the nationalists, the people who wanted to control everything, and they wanted an authoritarian dictator. And the other side were basically communists. They often presented themselves as more democratic socialists, but they were inspired by the Soviet Union. They were inspired by Mao, and they were explicitly communist. Now, a lot of people who fought on the communist side weren't necessarily communists. They just hated fascism. They viewed fascism as the immediate threat. They saw Hitler rising, and they saw Mussolini, and they thought that fascism was the more imminent threat, and they chose to side with the communists in trying to fight fascism, and then they would fight the communists. But it basically was socialism versus fascism. And if you think about it, at the time, the 1930s in Europe, that was the battle everywhere, right? So, communism was well established in the Soviet Union. Communism really was on the rise. It seemed like a power to be, and intellectually was on the rise in the 20s and early 30s. And to a large extent, the fascism of Mussolini and certainly the Nazism of Hitler were a response to the rise of communism. It was the idea that communism is the real enemy, socialism is the real enemy, and we, the fascists, are the only way to get rid of it. This is what I keep warning you about the American, far right, the new right, is they're making exactly the same claim. Communism is the real enemy. Woke, whatever you want to call it, is the real enemy. The only way to get rid of it is to give us power, and not just give us power in terms of elect us, but give us power so that we can use the government to get rid of wokeism. And then maybe we'll return to some form of liberty and freedom, but probably not, because power is a good thing and the state is a good thing, and we need order. We need order, and there'll always be a threat. it's the communists or the Jews or somebody. It's always the threat. It's the Mexicans, it's the Chinese, it's somebody. There's always a threat that the people on the right will find and the left. The left is now as much looking for threats outside the United States as the right is, and they will, they will use those threats to maintain power. But note that at the time in the 30s, the time of the Spanish Civil War, the two opposition forces were fascism and communism. And the idea of liberty, the idea of classical liberalism, as understood, was clearly on the decline, right? Liberalism was losing in Europe. Nazism and fascism were rising. It had lost any kind of, there was barely any attempt to win in Russia, and it was losing in capital after capital in Europe. There were massive demonstrations of the socialists and the communists. There were counter demonstrations of the fascists, but there was really no passion, no energy, no excitement, no idealism on the side of the liberal side. So they were not viewed as an option. They certainly were not viewed as an option to fight a civil war for. So what do you have left? You have the two ideals that are both the same in the end, in that they reject the individual. They reject you as an individual. They reject the value of the individual. So the two so-called opposites are actually the same. All right, Daniel says, here's my bribe, Yaron. Love the show. Haven't been able to catch your show lately. Being alcohol-free, sober for 2 months now. Cheers with my green tea. Excellent, Daniel. If you read Peter Attia's book, he's very anti-alcohol, particularly in large amounts. Going off of alcohol completely, not a bad idea if you want to live a long and healthy life. So good luck with that. Plus, I think it's good. It's definitely good for the brain. Alcohol seems to destroy brain cells. Yeah, good idea. Good for you. Richard, I think socialists conflate rights with values. For example, the right to housing and values. What do you think? How do fascists handle rights? Well, they don't have rights. They negate rights, just like the socialists. There are no rights, because rights are fundamentally individualistic. They're individual rights. They're human rights. They're individual human beings. And so the collectivists reject all rights. There's no such thing as rights, because rights give too much autonomy, too much credibility, too much moral value to the individual. And the individuals are just there to be sacrificed for the group. And one of the ways in which they destroy rights, in which they eviscerate the whole concept of rights, the whole idea of rights, one of the ways they do that is by giving you right to everything, right? You have a right to, I think the European Constitution has something like 300 different rights. You have a right to everything, animals have a right to everything, and they're violated all the time, and they conflict with one another. And that's how you eviscerate a concept. That's why you make it meaningless. And when you say something, but I have a right to that, people look at you like, come on, give me a break. Rights are ridiculous. Nonsense on stilts, right? Nobody takes them seriously. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think rights are taken seriously by left or right. I think they all think rights are a joke, and they throw them out. I mentioned I'm doing this conference in Europe with these right of center political parties, and last time I did this 2 years ago, I think it was, I was there and I gave a talk on liberty and rights, and the Polish delegation just thought it was the dumbest thing ever. They were like, there's no such thing. They didn't even want to debate it. They thought rights was such a ridiculous idea, so stupid, so irrelevant, and they're right wing. This is right wing. This is where the right is heading. These are nationalist Poles who are very Catholic. Rights? Come on. Whatever the nation needs. Whatever God requires. Whatever true faith dictates. Why are you talking nonsense, Yaron? I mean, I literally wouldn't even talk about it. It's interesting that I'm invited back. See, the thing is that in this group, there's a group of people in the group who still are kind of classical liberal. They still want rights. They're still kind of the old Margaret Thatcher kind of right. The remnants of Margaret Thatcher in this group. But they're in the minority. Clearly, they're in the minority. And they invite me as a spokesman for them. They want me to say the things they want to say. They don't have the words. They don't have the courage, maybe. They don't want to stand up to their colleagues. So they have me there, so I shake things up a little bit, right? But that's, and that's my role. But they're clearly in the minority. Daniel says, always love the show you're on. Your recommendations on reading Ominous Parallels by Leonard Piekoff opened my eyes even more. Yes, everybody should read Ominous Parallels by Leonard Piekoff, particularly on this issue of socialism and fascism, the best book out there. All right, this is the last question. If you want to come in, we got 70 people watching right now. If people just did like $5 or $10 or $3 or whatever as a, what do you call it? Sticker? As a sticker. That would be great, just to wrap up the show and get us a little closer to where we should be. That would be fantastic. But in any case, unless somebody comes in with a new question, Gail will have the last word. Please articulate again how once an individual is a member of a group, his rights are negated for the tribe. I'm looking for the best language. God, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for. But the reality is that once, it's not that an individual is a member of a group. It depends what membership means. But once an individual is willing to become subservient to the group, then rights are irrelevant. What matters is what the group wants. And the group wants can be expressed in a number of different ways. One way in which the group can express its views is through a democratic process, is through voting. People vote and the majority gets to dictate. That's one way. It's considered the most civilized way. But more often than not, groups elect leaders to do it instead of a vote, because the vote is, what about the minority? How does the majority know? Where does this knowledge come from? The minority, obviously the minority is not represented. But ideally what a group does, ideally for this perspective, right, is they elect a leader who can commune with the true spirit of the group, with the real intention of the group, with the mystical nature of the group, with the mystical source of the group. And then they can just tell the group what to do. And in that sense, rights are irrelevant. They're just not, it's not even that they're negated, because a negation of rights would recognize that they exist and then be rejected. They don't even recognize that they exist. There are no individual rights. You're just a part of this collective. Your life is not to be lived for its own sake. Your life is to serve. Your purpose is to serve. And the only way to serve in a meaningful, moral way, and to show that you really mean it, to show that you're being honest about it, is to sacrifice. And to sacrifice what? Your values, your individual values, your identity as an individual. So I'm not sure that's what you were looking for, Gail. But that is one approach to that question. But if you want something more specific, that is, you can ask again. All right, everybody. Again, thanks to all the super chatters. Really appreciate the support. You can still do a sticker. Those of you who are listening live later on YouTube, you can do a cheer or an applause and contribute that way. Those of you listening not live, please become a monthly supporter. You can do so on yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can also do so on Patreon. And we will have a news roundup tomorrow morning, and then a show at 3 p.m. on Saturdays. So thanks again, everybody. Look forward to seeing you in the morning. Have a great Thursday.